talk to you about some things, and we're going to start in Luke 1, and we see in verse 37. Now, here we see that Gabriel has come to Mary and has told Mary, you're going to have a son. And the first thing that Mary says is, how am I going to have a son? Because I'm a virgin. And he goes to them and he says, listen, first thing he tells is he said, do not yield to fear. Now, I have lived by that for probably the past 4 years as God has begun to unlock dreams in me, is that I would not yield to fear, okay? Because whenever God began to put promises over my life, the first thing I wanted to say is, how is it going to happen? But it's not our job to ask how, it's just to obey the voice. So he told her, he said, don't yield to fear because the Holy Spirit's going to come upon you. And when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, you're going to have a child. Not only are you going to have a child, your old cousin's going to have a child too. God loves giving old women babies. You see that all through the Bible. And so I love verse 37. After he tells her these things, he says, not one promise from God is empty of power. Nothing is impossible with God. Now that has been a mantra for me, that not one promise that God gives me is empty of power. Everything that's within that promise already has the power to come to pass. It's not in me, it's in Him. So I want you to turn over to Hebrews 11, and I'm still in the Passion. For probably last year, I was in Hebrews 11 for probably 6 months. I mean, every day, Hebrews 11. And the reason being was I felt like that the Lord wanted me to take me somewhere, and I needed faith. And I also knew, though, that He would give it to me if I asked Him for it. So that's the first thing. Second thing I knew, I want to know about all these people who had all this tremendous faith. What does it look like? And every time I would read Hebrews 11, my heart just kept getting quickened to say, okay, look at this, look at this. And so if you look at verse 6, I want to show you how I used to read this. It says, and without faith living within us, it would be impossible to please God. For we come to God in faith, believing that He is real and that He rewards the faith of those who passionately seek Him. Now, I want you to understand something. I was introduced to Jesus as a child, but I also grew up very religious. So I knew God as somebody who saved me because I almost felt like He contractually had to save me. Okay? So the best way I can describe my relationship with God is I believe that He contractually had to save me, and anything past salvation I had to perform to get. If I was good enough to do it, I could get it. Okay? He would be mad at me if I didn't do right. And that's just my mindset. So whenever I read this verse, I read it like this. And without faith living within us, it would be impossible to please God. The religious part of me saw that I had to have faith to please Him. Now that's true, but I left out the last part, which is more kingdom mindset, that says knowing that He's real. I can do that. I can believe that God's real. Okay, I can do that part. And that He rewards the faith of those that passionately seek Him. I made it too hard. What I was looking at is that, hey, it's impossible if I don't have faith. So I was looking at get faith, get faith, get faith, get faith, where He's saying, just seek me. And I had to change my perspective that if I'm going to have increased faith, I've just got to know You. And then as pastor began to preach that my faith is in a person, my faith is in Him, then I said, okay, there was a light bulb. Then I have to know the character of God. And once I know Him, I'll believe what He has for me is good. Okay? Perfect example this week. I went away this week to a training that is supposed to, really I am at a great company, but they offer this training and you pay to go. So, second time I've paid to go. But while I'm there, it's a very intense training, and you still have to work your business while you're there. I'm a realtor by trade. It's not who I am, but it's what I do. And so I had this transaction that I was like, Lord, help me. Emails keep coming through, 42 emails in one day. So I actually text some women from the church, and I text my kids, and I'm like, okay, you just got to pray. Something's going to have to happen. What I have learned is this. I have no control. God does. What I learned from this transition in my mindset is I was not scared. I was like, so what? If it happens, it happens. If it falls through, it falls through. Why? Because I so know that God loves me. I'm not going to fear the outcome because I already know what He's promised over me, that I'm the head and not the tail, I'm the first and not the last, I'm the lender and not the borrower. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen there. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm going to be okay. And by the way, it all ended up okay. I had a client who said they wouldn't do anything, they wouldn't give anything towards something that was really messed up with their house. Going from there to saying, I'll fix it all. Over $20,000 worth. That's the Lord. Hey, I always tell my kids, the Lord cares about the details. He cares about everything in my life. So I want you to look, if you keep going, I want us to look at Abraham this morning. Because that really, over the last year, changed my life. In verse 8, it says, faith motivated Abraham to obey God's call. So stop there. If you know anything about me, I'm very practical whenever I speak. So I'm not this major theologian. I'm just going to tell you, this is what Jesus spoke to me. Okay? Isaac likes to say that he and his dad, if God says something, they're like, okay, but what did he really mean? And me, I'm just like, God said it, I believe, let's just keep going. God said it, let's go, So, but it says here that faith motivated Abraham to obey God's call. The first thing I had to understand is that I had to be in a place where I could hear Him. And I understood that it's not that sin keeps me from hearing God, it's distractions. So what happens is you get distracted by things and you can't hear the voice of the Lord. So you have to ask yourself, what distracts you from hearing Him? What keeps you from hearing God? The best thing you can do is to date yourself and to know you. If you know you, you know how you work. You know how you perform. That's something that I would ask people whenever they would come to work for me. How do you work? I've learned that millennials don't like to work in an office. They want to work in a coffee shop. So guess what? As long as you get it done, I don't care. Me, at first, I'm like, I want you in this office. But I had to learn they're not productive that way. So wherever they're productive, I'm good. So the first thing I had to learn was that. Then, not only did he hear, he obeyed. So whatever he heard, he obeyed. One of the greatest messages that Pastor Sam preached was being aware of God. And that changed my life. It changed my life. Because I began to see that there were little things that God was speaking to me every day to do. Now, I don't listen all the time, just so you know. But I try. But I see times when I don't, why He told me to do it. So I have to be aware of the whispers of what He's telling me. Okay? So I have to be aware of Him. It says here that he obeyed God. I love what Bill Johnson says. He says that God always gives you choices, for in the choices lies the reward. Because if you had no choice, then there was no reward. And I think that's a beautiful thing. If you, so I want us to go for just a moment. I want to finish this for a second. And then he says in verse 8, faith motivated Abraham to obey God's call, and this was huge for me, and leave the familiar. I believe that familiarity is the opposite of the supernatural. If you're going to fulfill a promise that God has for you, it's very rarely going to be where you're comfortable. It's going to be somewhere where you don't know what you're doing. Because guess what? If you know what you're doing, why do you need faith? Okay? So I believe that familiarity is the opposite of supernatural. I believe that I even think about whenever I went into real estate, I had no idea what I was doing. None. I had no mentor. I didn't join a team. I was all by myself. I felt like, but I wasn't. Because I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how. But I had Jesus. There were certain things in me that from being here that I had learned, like there's a genius living inside of me. And he'll tell me what to do. He'll tell me what to do. I remember the first year I was in real estate, I was going to do a transaction. A woman that had been in real estate was on the other side. And she had been in it for 25 years. And she told me, you cannot do a VA, which is a veteran loan, on this. First of all, don't ever tell me I can't do something. I just said, okay. I showed the house anyway because I knew there was a way I could do, because there were 2 houses on 25 acres. I was like, I know there's a way. So I called the lender that I used and I said, hey, she's already had 2 VA loans on here and they've already not worked, but here's how I think it'll work. And he stopped for a second, and he's been doing it 15 years. And he stopped for a second and he said, Vanessa, I think that'll work. I said, I want you to see. And he did. And you know what? I called her. I said, hey, we're going to do a VA loan. And she just freaks out. And she's like, no, you can't do it. You can't do it. I said, wait a minute. And I explained to her how we were going to do it. And she was dead silence. Dead silence. And she said, I never thought about that. And I was thinking, I didn't either. The Holy Spirit did. I didn't think about it either. But that's the Lord. That's God helping me. So I also looked at that. It says that to discover the territory he was destined to inherit from God. Let me tell you something. There's a beautiful thing about discovery. If there wasn't, you wouldn't enjoy being around children so much. Think about it. There's a gentleman that, one thing I will say, probably 5 years ago, the Lord spoke to me. And he told me something. He said, don't read anything but the Bible until I tell you not to. I said, okay. Next thing he told me is he said, you can only listen to these ministers. And there were 3. I said, okay. So that's what I did. Well, I went away probably 2 years ago to pray. I like to go away once or twice a year to pray and to look at my business and to ask the Lord, what do you want me to do? I try not to go anywhere I can shop because I will get distracted. So I felt like the Lord told me to listen to this one minister that I used to listen to years ago, that seriously probably 20 years ago hugely impacted my life. And so I listened to it, and thinking about it, I'm so grateful. You should be grateful for the ministers that impacted your life. And I mean, I honor that man. I don't listen to him a lot now, but man, I honor that man. And so I started listening to him, and he said something great. He said, because see, to me, ideas are supernatural. If you have an idea, it's supernatural. See, we try to think that things like, and I'm not saying that healing the sick and raising the dead isn't supernatural, but if God gives you an idea, that's supernatural. And you know what he said? He said, God didn't build chairs, he created trees. And he gave you the brain to build the chair. And I loved that. I said, oh, that's good. And I've never forgotten that. So there's a beauty in discovery. That discovery, when you discover something, and let me tell you why that's beautiful too, because usually whenever I'm in the process of discovering, I'm on the journey with him doing it. Lord, I don't know what this has to do and where I'm going, but you're coming along with me. We're going to discover this together. There's a beauty in that. So if we keep going, I want you to turn to Genesis 12 for just a minute. And I'm going to be in the New King James in this. And I want us to look for, because there were some things about Abraham that I had never seen. And some you're going to know. If you do, that's great. So in Genesis 12, verse 1, the Lord said to Abram, this is before he changed his name. He said, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house. What's he doing? He's leaving his familiar territory. He's saying, get out to a land that I will show you. Now, here's what I love. Abraham is going to have to follow the voice of the Lord. He's not giving him the how. He's just telling him where. Okay? So I think a lot of times God gives us a promise or a dream within us, and he just says, this is it, and we don't know how it's going to happen, and you just have to listen to every little single voice. And let me tell you why I think he does that, because it makes us need to listen to each and everything he's telling us. If he gave you, it's like, if he gave you the entire recipe, what would be the need to hear his voice? Our humanity always wants answers. When really, and here's where you have to be careful, it's never about the promise, it's about him. It's never about the dream that's within you, it's about him. Okay? Because if you get that mixed up, if you don't hear anything else, know that. If you get that mixed up, you'll miss out. Because then you'll fulfill something that's out of order. And then you're not going to have him with you. Okay? So he left what was familiar, and he says, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. I will make you a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And in all the families of the earth, you shall be blessed. So he's saying, now listen, I want you to get out of your familiar place. But I almost like to think of it as like a bubble blessing. Everything around you is going to be blessed. The people who bless you is going to be blessed. The people who don't, they're going to be cursed. They better watch it. Now, Abram was 75 when he received this blessing, when he received this promise. So here's what I love. He goes to Canaan. He sets up camp in Canaan. Then here comes a famine, and he and Sarah decide to go to Egypt. Well, Sarah is beautiful. So they decide to tell Pharaoh that Sarah is his wife. And of course, Pharaoh finds out because plagues come. So he said, hey, get out of here. So what did they do? They're really not on the exact path they're supposed to be. But I want you to pull up Genesis 13, verse 2. Here's what I love. I want to make sure I'm telling you right according to what I've got. Yep. All that happened. Now, this was huge for me. You often think that while you're waiting on what the finished product or promise is supposed to be, that you're not going to be blessed. Look at this. He didn't have a son yet, but he was rich in livestock and silver and in gold. Now, here's what I love about that. When you're waiting on something that you fulfill, that you feel like God hasn't answered for you or done for you yet, that does not mean you're in limbo. What that means is that you're just listening to everything that he's saying, and he's still increasing you, and he's still blessing you. What we so want is we want the finished product, and we don't enjoy the promise and the process. That's what I mean, the process. And we're always in process. You might as well get used to being okay with the process. Because let me tell you something, once I get out of one process, he puts me in another one. And I'm like, I just got out of one. Why am I going back in? Can't I tap somebody else in? Kind of like wrestling. Ric Flair. Rock and Roll Express, I know I love him. Hulk Hogan, I was a Hulkamania fan. Listen, I'm telling you, we had a thing one time for church where we got to dress up, and I dressed up like Hulk Hogan. Big silver belt, and Tina dressed up like Cyndi Lauper. I don't think that was too good. We were 13. And I had Hulkamania on there. But you have to understand, my grandpa Fall, he was a big wrestling fan. So he made us watch wrestling whether we wanted to or not. I seriously, though, when I was 11, had a wrestling ring and had all the wrestlers. I had Junkyard Dog. Yeah, I had Junkyard Dog. I had them all. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But I loved them. Not a full-size wrestling ring. Lane, I didn't get in a full-size wrestling ring. It was a small one. But what I love about this is that we often think that we have to wait till God's done to receive blessing and things from him. Abraham had just told him that Sarah was his sister. But guess what? He was still receiving exactly what God had told him. He was still being blessed. And I loved that. Then if you go on and I don't want to take up too much. I didn't even see what time I started. Mark asked me how long I'd be. And I told him I was going to be 6 hours. I said, why? You going to go play golf? He said, every day. I said, there are no games on today. But Mark will find a game. I don't care what the game is. He's going to find a game. Listen, he doesn't care what it is. I'm like, oh my goodness. So in Genesis 15, in verse 4, I want us to look for just a minute how Abraham waited. What I love about him, the only way that he could have waited and been faithful is because he trusted in who God was. The only way that you can wait and be okay is to trust in the character of God and know that his promises are true. That's the only way it's going to happen. Okay? So it says in 15:4, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir. Now, why is that saying that? Because Abram is thinking, he's asking God, is Eliezer, is the servant going to be my heir? Because you said I'm going to have a son. And the Lord said, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. And he believed in the Lord, and it counted to him for righteousness. Now, here's what's amazing, though. Genesis 16, if you were to read the next chapter, well, they decide to have a child with Hagar. Why am I showing you this? Because I feel like we don't give ourselves enough grace when we mess up. We don't give ourselves enough grace when we mess up. Guess what? Sarah said, hey, you know what? It's been a long time. You're 86. Let's go ahead and have a baby. Now, I don't know what she's thinking. That would never happen with me. I'd be like, if you look at my husband wrong, I'm going to knock you out, you know? But she was like, here's my husband, you know? So they mess up. They shouldn't have done that. That didn't change the promise. See, that's what I love about God. You have to, and if you are caught up in religion, you don't give yourself enough grace. And if you understand grace, you don't use it to sin. What you do is grace causes you to love. It causes you to love God. It causes you to love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. So if what you call grace gives you permission to sin, then you have the wrong view of grace. Okay? But what I love is that it never changed God's promise. He was still going to have this baby that God said you're going to have. Okay? Why? Because what did Luke 1:37 say? Not one promise is void of power. Because nothing's impossible with God. Okay? So then in Genesis 17, God speaks to Abraham again and told him, you're going to be a great nation. Abraham's probably sitting there thinking, I've heard it before. You keep telling me. Not sure how that's going to happen. He keeps telling him something that is completely impossible. Now, I want to tell you something. I have come to a place where the dreams that I have are so big that I will only say them around a few people. This will make me. This week we had to, they did some very powerful things this week that at first, when you first go to this, sometimes I'm thinking, are y'all doing that? What's that guy who I feel like, he's weird to me. He was in Shallow Hal that puts his hand on somebody. Tony Robbins. At first I'm like, are y'all doing Tony Robbins crap? Because if you are, I'm not, Which sometimes I think I have Shallow Hal syndrome because I'll see myself in a picture. I'm like, who is that? I'm like, oh God, that's you. So anyway, but they have this book that's amazing that I see God in. Every time I read it, I see God. So one of the things, and I'm going to tell you this, the way that you will leave the familiar is going to be, I'm going to tell you the greatest, if you hear nothing else, the greatest way you're going to leave the familiar is you're going to change your mindset, because you're going to start to believe that God is who He is and that He loves you and that anything's possible. If you change your mindset, then a lot of times that's how you get from the familiar to where God wants you to be. So they had us do this thing that they said, okay, we want you to write a letter to yourself in a year of everything that's happened great in your life this year. Now, you got people in there who are doing millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of real estate. And there's probably 65 professionals in there. And when you see hope begin to unlock in people who are even lost, people just start, one woman started wailing in there. Because a well of hope began to unlock for her. That, okay, this next year, this is what's going to happen. And this is what I'm going to see. And man, I wrote a letter. I read it to my husband this morning. I said, I'm going to read this to you. And this is what's going to happen next year. And it was a beautiful thing. I even saw that in people who were not even saved. That when hope came alive, they didn't realize how much despair had weighed them down. You know, because what does the Bible say? Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And it began to just give them, it was a beautiful thing to watch. So you see, Genesis 18, Abraham and Sarah received that holy visitation. And they have them saying, in verse 10, he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. And behold, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? What was she asking? How? How's it going to happen? You're saying I'm going to have a baby. I'm past the age of being able to do that. That's what I love about what Pastor Bryn preached the other Sunday, being untethered to time. It does not matter how old we are or where we're at or what it looks like. Not one promise of God is without power. There's nothing impossible with God. In Genesis 21, you will see that God visited Sarah. And in a place where she was old and so was he, they had a baby. They had their promise. They had exactly what God had said. What does this have to do with us? I believe within each of us there are seeds of things that sometimes we let go dormant. Now I will say this, I believe that disappointment will cover up many promises and I don't want you to hear this but I believe that as Christians we're supposed to dream. I believe we are supposed to have big dreams because we have a big God. And here's the thing, do you know that I believe that your dreams assess your view of God? Now, don't feel bad if you have small dreams. I think sometimes we feel, remember when Pastor did the thing at Christmas and he said, write down what you want to see from God this year. And I kept sitting there going, oh, is this big enough? Is this big enough? And then I'm like, what am I doing? You know? I mean, this is what I dreamed for, so this is what I want. This is what I want at this moment. You may be a mother and you're like, my dream is that my kids would sleep all night. Hallelujah. Because I've been there. I was a stay-at-home mom for years. Let me tell you why. Because the fulfillment of the small dreams then give you faith for the bigger ones. So you don't ever despise the small ones because then gives increased faith for the next ones. And so that's what I love about that. But what happens is as your dreams begin to, sometimes we have these seeds I will never forget. Just to share a little bit of what happened to me. When I first started, first of all, I never wanted to start real estate, ever. My husband wanted me to start real estate. He kept telling me, I think you should do it, I think you should do it. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, And I had given him a career I thought I wanted to go back to school for. And he looked at me and he said, why do you want to do that? You will never make any money. So finally I told him, I'll go if you go with me. I'll go to real estate school if you go with me. So we went for 6 weeks, 75 hours, Saturday and Sunday, and we failed. So he likes to say that he beat me by 1 point. He likes to tell me that every time. We went to Lake Norman. Now, let me tell you something big about it, because there's 2 things about dreaming that I think are important. Number one, they assess your view of God. And I want you to understand this. Well, I'll go back to that in a second. Number 2, it assesses your identity. I went to Lake Norman, and I went there, and I didn't feel comfortable there. I felt out of sorts there. What was beautiful is as I came into my identity, we ended up moving to the lake and living on the lake for 3 years, and I loved it. I'm like, oh, I'm at home. It's amazing when God does something on you internally that what you used to feel out of place in, you now feel at home in. Okay, that was something very practical. So then what happened, though, the way that dream was dormant in me, when I did pass, I knew I would always work at my company. So I went into that company, and that broker in charge really began to grill me. I mean, he grilled me, and I liked it because I thought he's going to hold my feet to the fire. And he looked at me and he said, how do you know you're going to be any good at real estate? And I had on my $20 clearance dress from Ross and my clearance shoes that I forgot to take my sticker off of. I think about that now but something in me rose up. It was like that seed. And I sat back and I crossed my legs and I said, I'm going to tell you something. I'll sell a lot of real estate and I'll sell a lot of homes, and I'll either do it for you or I'll do it for somebody else. So you choose. I didn't even know that seed was there. I did not even know it was there. But something just rose up in me. It's like, ooh. I was like, I told Mark, I said, let me tell you something. I don't know if they'll hire me because what I told him. But they hired me. There were times that I saw that happen all the time. I remember that several years ago, somebody asked me to list a certain portion of land, and it was something that I wanted to do. Nobody in my office had ever did it before. I did it. And then I decided I needed a commercial broker to co-list it with me. So I called one. He came in. He does a lot of business. He said, I will not help you with this. You are wasting your time, and you will never get this amount of money out of that. So I leaned forward. I smiled real big. I said, I'm so glad you told me that. And he said, why? I said, because you just lit a fire in me. Not only will I sell it, I'll sell it for what I said I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to call you when I do. And now I'm fiery. I'll tell you that, I'm fiery. And he got back, and he emailed me, and he said, I really want to work with you at some time. That land's under contract. Not just that land, the land beside of it too is under contract, and I'm waiting to get more with it. God's a good God. That's not because of me. It was because there was something in me that as I began to spend time with God, my identity began to form that, okay, he can help me do anything. So whatever I put my mind to, I can do. I can do it. And the religious would call that arrogant, but I call it confident. I say that I'm confident in who I know that God has called me to be. And that's okay. And the people who are offended by my confidence and my identity are those who are insecure in theirs. And so you have to be okay with that. That does not mean that I go to offend. I have found that whenever I work with people that are very offended by that, and I'm just going to be quite honest, most of the time it's religious people, I tread lightly because I don't want to offend them, but I also don't share my dreams with them. I don't share my dreams with them. Okay, because I know that they could be, without knowing it, a dream killer. Okay? So there are times in my life that I've just seen those dormant seeds just start to come forth. And I think that within each of us, as you spend time with the Lord and get to know him, you can't help but begin to just see things that you want to do, and don't discount them. Don't discount them, but be patient. Be patient. Whenever I started real estate, here's the thing. You have to be patient because I don't think that God had to prepare me to carry what He was going to give me. So for 5 months, I did not sell one house. And I went in here and told him I'm going to sell a lot of real estate. And I went to him and I said, I don't know what else to do. I'm doing everything you've told me to do. It's been 5 months. And he told me, he said, Vanessa, I went in every morning at 8 o'clock without clients and worked every day, listening to people who were very successful to try to learn how they did it. And then left from there after working every day and worked at night. Now, that's why some people don't have dreams, because they don't want to do it. And then worked at night till late at night. And I did that every day for 5 months. It got to the point on the 5th month that Mark and I had a discussion. I said, if I have to quit this night job, what I'm thinking about doing is trying to find a 3rd shift job so that I can do this all day and show homes at night. And he was like, baby, we'll figure it out. But I said, but I know I'm supposed to do it now. I really know I'm supposed to do it. So I went to my boss, and my boss said, listen, Vanessa, it was on a Friday. He said, you're making it rain. It's going to rain. I said, okay. So I come to church that Sunday, and Pastor gets up, and he says, I don't know why I was supposed to preach another message. But I was sitting down here, and the Lord told me to come, and I'm supposed to preach that He's getting ready to make it rain. He said, and some of you have been waiting, and I'm getting ready to unlock the rain. And then at the end of the service, he pointed me out and he said, the rain's getting ready to open up over your business. And Mark did not even know that my boss had said that. My boss is not a Christian at the time. And I'm just like, as soon as Pastor said that, I just started crying because I'm like, Lord, you've heard my heart. You've heard my heart. So the Lord began to just shower and just show me His goodness. And the way that all started was whenever I started, I had not even sold one thing of real estate. And I was getting ready to start the company, and I was in a place and I saw this journal that said, I give you keys to the kingdom. And the Holy Spirit told me to buy it. I said, okay. So I bought that journal. I still have it to this day. And I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I've never known you as a good God. I've only known you as somebody who was mad at me. But this year, I want to know you as a good God. And whatever that means, if it means in real estate, if it means I said, but I just want to know you as a good God. Meet with me. So every day, what I did for every day that year was I would write down verses about the goodness of God for a year. Just about how good He was. And I just said, Lord, just show it. And He just unlocked my world and began to show me. And there were 2 things I asked Him. I said, number one, I said, Lord, anywhere I go, I want you to go with me. And number 2, I want you to show me your goodness, whatever that means. Doesn't have to mean in real estate. It can just be in my heart. And He did that. He did that. One of my favorite ones, and that I loved, and I had it on the, I actually had it in my car, that I kept it in my car all the time. And I went and got my car washed one time. This guy came out, he said, "Ooh, I love your verse." It says, Lord, you're so kind and tenderhearted to those who don't deserve it, so patient with people who fail you. Your love is like a flooding river overflowing its banks with kindness. And I loved that, and I would just read it over and over and over and understood that, God, it doesn't matter it's who you are. So I want you to look at one last verse before I let you go. So if there's anything I could tell you, I want you to go back to Hebrews 11, and we're going to end it there. Some of the things that I learned even as I went in trying to, and let me tell you something, I still got a long way to go. Believe me. One thing I've been praying to the Lord for is, Lord, I know how to make money, but I haven't learned how to create wealth. There's a difference. So, Lord, help me. Give me wisdom with that. And I believe that the Lord has started to pinpoint certain people in my life that I'm supposed to go to and say, teach me. Teach me how to do that. You know, because believe me, I'm humble enough to know I need help. But some of the things, I'll just tell you this. If you have seeds that you feel like are dormant in your life of dreams and things you don't even remember, don't try to go after the dreams, go after Him. And then those will come forth. And then just remember that some of the biggest dream killers are bad theology, not believing that God's good. Fear of failure, believing that failure defines you, and it doesn't. If you mess up, you mess up. You know what I realized? My kids told me something last year. They was like, Mom, I think it was my daughter, said, I always see you have things together, and I know that things go wrong, but I don't know how you fix them. And I was like, oh. So it's okay for them, because if they never see me fail, they're never going to know how to get up. So that's big. And then you have to also have the right environment around you. I only have people around me that can pray. Transaction coordinator that I have, she prays. She loves Jesus. Whenever I had, it's so funny. Kaylin worked for me for about a year. And, you know, she would have like scriptures on my calendar. And then Danielle would have, be with your boo day. I was like, look at the difference. Be with your boo day. And then she'd have, love your daughter extra special today. And then she'd have. But I needed both. I really did. I needed both. You know, and Kaylin would put like, healing is flowing through this land. And then right below it seriously said, be with your boo day. I'm like, this is hilarious. But I have people around me, and I only really share my big dreams with those people who I believe would breathe life into them, not suck life out of them. That's why it's important that you be grounded somewhere. But if you look in Hebrews 11, I want to finish with this. In verse 11, Sarah's faith embraced God's miracle power to conceive. Even though, now listen, she had to believe that she could conceive before she could give birth. So you got to believe you can conceive, but she had to believe that she could conceive, even though she was barren and was past the age of childbearing. And I love this. I put this on the women's Facebook page because this has rocked my world for the past year. For the authority of her faith rested in the one who made the promise, and she tapped into His faithfulness. That's the one where everything comes true, is through His faithfulness. It's not about what I can do. It's about His faithfulness. It makes absolutely no sense. When you see where I was at 4 years ago to where I am now, it makes absolutely no sense. None. But it's God. It's God. And I just had to learn to lean into Him and say, Jesus, I love you, and I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. If you tell me to do you know that for 8 months, I think it was 6 or 8 months, it might have been 6, the Lord told me, don't you put anything online of whenever you close on a house. And I thought, ooh. Because that's the number, I've never did a lot of marketing, you know. And I thought, that's my free marketing. But I said, okay, Lord. Didn't bother my business one bit. Why? He was teaching me that your business never comes from anybody else other than me. It looked like to other people, it would look like business suicide. Not to the kingdom people. Be totally okay. Totally okay. So if there's anything you can remember, and if you get no other verse, if you read this verse, I have read this verse over and over, that it rests in the one who made the promise. Anything that God puts in it, it's about the one who makes the promise and about His faithfulness. He completes the work. We're just there. He's still fulfilling dreams for me. And like I said, you had to be patient. 2 years ago, I had a dream because we have some Hispanic people come in our office. And one could speak they could speak great English, and the others could not. And they were telling me and the one who could not was trying to ask me about real estate. And I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. So I called Corey, and I asked Corey to translate. And Corey translated for me, and I became infuriated because I realized what this young woman was trying to do was totally not right. Someone was trying to take advantage of them. And I told Corey, I said, tell her to run. Tell her, do not do it, run. And so I found a Spanish-speaking agent, and I referred them. Well, then a dream got in my heart, and I was like, okay, this is a need. There is a need for the community, the Hispanic community, to have someone they can trust. But it can't be me. It can't be me. I'm sorry, I can't learn Spanish. If I did, it would sound terrible. With my twang, that would sound terrible. I tell Daniela, I said, can you see me saying, "Como te llamas"? I said, that's terrible. I said, that's awful. We had a client come in the other day, and I said, I can't say his name. I'm just going to call him, what did I say, Julio or something? I said, I'm just going to call him Julio. I can't say his name. But 2 years ago, I went and had a conversation with Daniela, and I said, Daniela, I would love for you to do this. I'd love for you to come on. But I had to be patient. I had to be patient till the time was right for her, and the time was right for us. And my dream and her dream is going to be fulfilled, that the whole community, Hispanic community, will be able to be empowered with the love of God around here and be able to create wealth and be able to invest. That's a beautiful thing. So you have to give place to patience and to the Lord, and when its timing is right. Okay? So I just want to pray for a second. So, Lord, I just thank you for your people. Lord, I thank you that within each of them, there are dreams and there are visions that you've given them, and there are promises. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is that they not get weary. That, Lord, that they'll be patient, and that, Lord, they'll get to know you, because in you lies all good things. So, Lord, I just pray that they'll be patient and that they'll just get to know you more. Because, Lord, I learned that in your arms, everything comes true. And, Lord, even things that I couldn't imagine or think come true. And, Lord, I'm excited about what's going to happen in my life, in my children's lives, about the presence that's going to be just in them and even in these people's lives, Lord. And Lord, it's not all about provision, it's about presence. So Lord, I thank you that that's going to go first. I pray that you will just, in us, God, that we'll have an innate desire to dream with you, to see how big you are, and to know that we are loved and who we are. Lord, I declare that we will know that we are loved by you, and that we are your children. In your name I do pray, Lord.